What's Miles from Black Film and TV talking to the directors and producers of Making Black America Through the Grapevine. Hello, ladies. How's it going?
It's good.
You guys are not new to the documentary world, so this is old hat. So when it comes to this project, how did you guys come on board with this? Stacey?
Well, we actually, Shayla and I were the producing directors for the Black Church, and this was just seems like a natural just transition to collaborate with Professor Gates, who I'll probably defer to as Skip, go between Professor Gates and Skip. So when he had spoke to us about his idea for it, we were excited about it, and we were a little overwhelmed by it because it's making Black America. It's a huge story, 1775 to present day.
And what about you, Shayla?
Similarly, we had a really fruitful collaboration on the Black Church and wanted to keep the thing, keep the gang going. And so this story seemed like a really exciting opportunity to tell a different aspect of African American history than what we had focused on in the prior series. So for me, that was exciting. And, we didn't expect that COVID would come and interrupt our production in the way that it did. But, very, very excited to dig into a meaty series like this.
The title is so broad. It's definitely challenging. After seeing the episodes, I'm like, got to give it credit to whoever the editor is, because that's a lot of work you got to put together and make it work. And then trying to make it coherent as far as where are we going with this? So many aspects of it. How long was the process in determining what to shoot and where it would be placed, and then cutting it up and bringing in like folks like Andre and other folks in there to comment on the subject matter that they're talking about? Either one can answer this. As far as how long was the whole process? So you're saying this was done. Usually documentaries take forever because there's no endpoint. When you're doing a bio documentary, it's it's beginning, an end. But when you're talking this mass subject, where do you start from? So let's start with how long ago did this come about?
At Stacey.
It's like I feel like in COVID, like everything feels like a decade. So we started this actually on the heels of like 2020, like literally in the midst of kind of before the pandemic became, what it was. And we pretty much, it's safe to say we really finished, and I say finished, meaning sending everything to PBS. I mean, really this year, early this year, like deliverables. So it was, as Shayla said, we did this in the midst of COVID. So it was a lot that we had to rethink, but yet it was a challenge, but a challenge we welcomed creatively. How do we tell this massive story? How do we kind of get Skip in a space that people are so used to seeing him in, interacting with guests, and how do we keep everybody safe on top of that? And then, the editors, I mean, it was, like I said, 1775 to present day. It was a lot of stories. We had to find a lot of connective tissue as to, what is carrying us across the 4 hours, but also what are we speaking to if it's not going to carry us for the entire 4 hours. And our editors were amazing. I mean, yeah, we were like, okay, no definitive book, here you go. And they took
it's a lot.
And
that first episode was like, there's a lot going on, and we got 3 more here to go. And so the question is like, where's their central theme per episode? Even though you're trying to make something linear in terms of like, okay, where are we going for this? Was there a central theme you wanted to come across? Especially, with the first episode, that's going to be the determining factor whether or not people come back for the next 3 episodes. Shayla?
No, I mean, that's a great question. That's something that we totally grappled with, given the broadness of this potential subject. Is, one of the things that I think we got to was that there are these moments in American history that you have a sort of assumption about how Black people experienced it. When you think about the colonial period, or you think about the period of enslavement, that this is just Black people struggling to get free and all of that, which is an aspect of the story. But what I thought was really beautiful about episode 1 was that there were Black towns, there were these colored conventions, there were people writing love stories in French, that there was this whole just expansive idea of Blackness that doesn't often get centered in these representations of African American history. So that was one thing that we wanted to kind of capture, was stories that people don't often hear about these periods in history and reframe them. So, you know, the period of the nadir is often focused on, lynching and, race relations and just these sort of awful things like Black Wall Street, but it also was this period of the flowering of Black business and HBCUs and, Black fraternities and sororities. So it was just a counter narrative is sort of what we were constantly pushing for. And also this idea, after integration or after the end of legal segregation, these things would disappear, which didn't actually happen, that there was this actually reassertion of the Black aesthetic and the Black perspective through hip hop, through, authors like Toni Morrison and things like that. So, for us, it was like these counter narrative stories were the things that kind of kept rising to the top. And then in terms of the other theme that we wanted to kind of thread through the episodes was, this idea of community and getting Skip in these Black spaces. So we have Skip in this literary society. We have Skip in a barbershop. We have Skip at a rent party. We have Skip at Weeksville Heritage, which is like the oldest Black town in Brooklyn, with these, members of his community who he can really talk to and let his hair down. So that was the other kind of organizing principle of the series.
Was there a point in time where you said to yourself, we don't want to include something that people have heard about already?
Yeah.
You get this footage and like you've been there, done that. Give me something new.
I felt like for me, my approach was definitely like, people have heard this a million times. Is there a way that we can flip this on its head? I know often in the 20th century, it's sort of like Black history is like the Great Migration and the Civil Rights Movement, and like the 40 years between that, like just get kind of like yada yada. And so for us, it was like, oh, there's actually this really rich story that's happening here that sort of like impacts the history to come. And so like, let's unpack that and let's shine a light on that.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of getting, obviously when you're working throughout COVID and for the most part, we're all home. Was it challenging when you're trying to get stuff as opposed to going to person and everything is through email as far as I need this footage and then doing all this stuff from home?
That was hard. I mean, I really missed that. Eventually, we were able to sit with our editors, but just even before our editors came in the room, I mean, I really just missed going into the next room and just like spitballing with Shayla, like, okay, let's talk this through. Doing that with our co-producers. I mean, there was something that was lost in that sense in terms of the creative process. I mean, we figured it out. But I truly, and I think I can speak for most of the team, truly miss that just the easiness and the flow of just being able to quickly get a response instead of like, hey, are you free? Oh, I wasn't, sorry, my phone wasn't on, I'm on a call, so, but I think we were able to figure out, and I think we're able to make something really that we're all proud of.
And at the end of the day, obviously, not so much at the end of the day, when you have this footage and you want to include it in, you're throwing, getting the rights, getting all these footage, and then obviously and putting it in there with Skip back and forth and so forth. You guys have been doing this a long time, so you know where to cut the red tape in terms of getting the rights to the music, to the footage, so that way what we're saying is something new here. Was that a challenge? Because I know with documentaries, I just saw one last night, and when you hear the director and the editor talk about putting this stuff together and waiting for somebody to say yes and then getting it when you needed to get it. So like so how long did it take once you got all the footage? How many hours of shot compared now we only got 4 hours and 4 shows? And was there a challenge as far as what you knew, where you're going to place these things? Was there a map? And my question, obviously there was a map there. So did you know how to put all this stuff in there? Because every hour is packed with a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we're lucky that we had a really incredible archival team. Stacey and I are not necessarily researching all of those, inches of footage or, frames of footage and photos. And so we're lucky that we had that support to help us kind of cast a wide net to get that material and get it in a timely fashion. Because as you said, libraries were closed, research institutes were closed during COVID. So there was a lot of delays that we wouldn't have ordinarily encountered. So, you kind of like make it work, which is, when you have a deadline, you make air, not art. So like, at a certain point, you just have to go with what you had. In terms of music, I think we also were lucky in that we had this incredible African-American female composer, Sultana Isham from New Orleans, who really created this cohesive sort of feeling and bed. So we could rely on her to kind of help us as a collaborator, give us the kind of mood of this series. But yeah, I mean, it's not easy to put together like a massive 4-hour series with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of, little pieces, and to make sure that everything is buttoned up by the end of the day. But we were lucky that we had such a great team to do it.
Each of you have worked on different projects and together. What did you learn after this project that you can take on to the next one? Like, what's the latest thing you learned as filmmakers that, because everybody continues to learn in every aspect, that you can say, okay, next time I'm going to do this, whether it's to expedite something or, you're trying something new.
I mean, I learned I can make a film during a pandemic. That was,
I think we all can do that with a phone.
Some people didn't.
Some people didn't. I mean, I think, being able to just have all the pieces together. And I think, like I said earlier, really, it challenged me creatively. How do you tell a visual story when you necessarily don't have a lot of those visuals available, whether it's archive, because archive is not there, people are not gathering. So it showed me just how storytelling is constantly evolving and constantly pushing and challenging me, and just to kind of push myself to figure it out, which
yeah, I mean, I definitely felt like I learned a certain level of resourcefulness after working on this series. But I mean, also like content wise, for me, it was actually really incredible to dig into these stories that don't often get highlighted and to learn about them. That's the reason that I got into filmmaking and storytelling, is I'm a curious person and I want to learn about stuff. And some of these things I had assumed that I'm a Black person, like I know this, but like that's obviously not true. And so for me, it was like a real opportunity to dig into some like newer stories in a newer way that I think is inspiring. Like any one of these subjects could be their own film. So I think for me, there's like, oh my God, there's so many rich stories out there that, are just waiting to be told.
There is a lot there. I always get these emails about Skip Gates and he's got this project, this. And sometimes you're like, okay, I get it. He's on TV almost every day, and this was refreshing because I've been seeing a lot of documentaries on individuals. So you're learning about certain people. This was a lot in there that you can actually sit there and you watch it, because every 5 minutes is something different. You're throwing it in there. Literally every 5 minutes, it's like, we're going here, we're talking about love, we're talking about racism, we're talking about, this time period or that time period. I'm like, the first thing I'm saying to myself, like, that editor must have had a lot of work to do, trying to put together this splice into 2 minutes and so forth. And so I think a lot of people will get something out of this. For you, what's next, after this, or at the end of the day, before, as we try to sell this project, there's a glut of TV right now, a lot of projects, whether it's cable, network, movies and theaters, everybody has an option of what to watch. Why should people watch this, when it's on? Because nowadays, it's not like we had channel 2, 4, and 7 like 20 years ago, and we were stuck watching this stuff. Now we got like 100 channels. Shayla?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, we hope that by being on PBS, this series is accessible to more people who maybe don't have streaming and don't have access to, a million channels, cable channels. But I also think that, like I said, at a time in this moment where there is a pushback on teaching history and kids learning about certain stories, in schools, this can be the thing that fills that gap for people. And this is not just an African-American series. This is not just for African-American people to understand this history. It's certainly for anyone who loves America and loves American history to understand that there are all these other stories that don't often get told and add to this richer fabric of the American tale that need context and need understanding. So, I mean, I would hope for those reasons that people would tune in.
Stacey?
I would just add to that. It's, you know, in the midst, under, through it, there's joy. And I think there's a lot of programming, which is important programming, that's talking about the challenges, the injustices. But what about the joy? What about when we can just sit back and laugh, or we can just enjoy each other's presence? And I feel like this film just gives us a chance to just catch our breath and just say, you know, this is beautiful. This is wonderful. This is laughter.
And history and learning. You know, and there's
exactly.
a lot. You can get a lot out of it. Ladies,
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. You know, we'll make sure we get this thing out. I know it's early in the day, so get some coffee, have some juice. We have a long way to go. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.